Okay, welcome to this session on managing growth in worker cooperatives. My name is John McNamara. I'm a Cooperative Development Specialist with the Northwest Cooperative Development Center in Olympia, Washington. I'm also a member of the Democracy at Work Network, and most of what I'll be talking about today comes from my practical experience as a member and manager of Union Cab of Madison, a worker cooperative in Madison, Wisconsin. And what we'll be talking about today is managing growth and in a worker cooperative format. And so some of the questions and ideas I think that we should keep present as through this discussion is that first, the growth happens. Again, coming from a taxi cab environment, taxi cab companies and generally have to provide service. They can't just turn people down. And so growth, when the city grows, the cab company's marketplace grows and its demand grows, and it has to grow with it. However, all businesses are going to grow within their life cycle. The issue isn't about fighting growth, it's about managing growth in a way that can maintain our social cohesion as a membership organization. And this involves understanding our cooperative identity, and we'll be talking about the new cooperative paradigm presented by Dr. Cote in Quebec, and also recognizing that as we grow our businesses, we also need to grow our governance. A cooperative designed for $100,000 a year in sales is going to look a lot different than one that does $5 million a year in sales. And so as our co-ops grow, we need to scale our governance with that. First things we want to talk about are understanding the co-op's mission statement, and then we'll look at the environment, and then we'll talk about ways of engaging the membership. So first, the importance of the mission statement. If your cooperative doesn't have one, it should consider one. It allows the cooperative to have concrete ways of engaging its community. Knowing the environment is about gaining that knowledge, and then finally engaging the membership is making sure that they're part of discussion about growth, not just in terms of getting the information, but in being actively involved with creating the growth possibilities and maintaining the cohesion as you go through it. So the first step, of course, is the mission. Using my old co-op as an example, Union Cab's mission is to create jobs at a living wage or better in a safe, humane, and democratic environment by providing quality transportation to the greater Madison community. You can see this is very different from the way a lot of non-cooperatives would place their mission. Often you'll see more corporate mission statements as creating shareholder value or maximizing return on investment. Worker cooperatives' missions tend to be much more about creating meaningful workplaces and a quality of work life. In the case of Union Cab, they took it a step further by connecting their quality of work life to the quality transportation that they provide. So if you get a sense, by creating a safe and humane workplace, they create a safe and humane customer experience. And that's one way of seeing how the mission really comes alive. The importance of this is that cooperatives don't want to get too far away from their mission if they're growing. If, for instance, while Union Cab is providing cab service, opening a tavern might be really outside that mission statement, and they would need to think about their expertise and their values. And so before going too far astray from a mission statement, the co-op might want to have a discussion about what their mission should be. And it might be that their environment's changing enough that they need to change a little bit of focus on their business. And so that's why I think one reason why it's important to have a discussion about mission before you really engage in a growth discussion is the mission still valid, and where does it put you into the environment? And then this can lead to a larger environmental study. And for this, there are two tools that I've used. One is pretty traditional, called the pestle analysis. Sometimes it's called the step analysis or pest analysis. It's simply a means of looking at where your cooperative sits in an environment by breaking it down into 6 areas: the political, economic, societal, technological, environmental, and legislative. Most of these tend to be externally focused, so you'll look at your economic situation in your community, what your competitors are doing. Political is perhaps what sort of regulations are there, the technological aspects, what's happening in terms of your industry with technology. Since, for instance, right now there's a lot of disruption in the taxi cab business from share apps, and like, you can also include within societal, though, an internal focus, and that might be where you survey memberships and do an internal social audit to appraise the co-op of how it's achieving its values, and also its some of the other internal aspects might be in economic and looking at the cooperative's financial numbers. So this gives a pretty rounded picture of the overall environment. It's kind of a snapshot of where the cooperative is and what is out there around within its environment and what opportunities there might be. The next is a little bit different. It's Michael Porter's 5 forces model. This specifically looks at power relationships within the environment. So the central force is the competitive rivalry. How competitive is your particular industry that you're in? For instance, in Madison, there are 4 existing cab companies, and now, of course, there are share ride companies that are operating illegally, but nevertheless, they're still within that rivalry. So this model really gets into power dynamics, and it's important to understand this because there are things that are affecting how our cooperatives are able to operate that are beyond our control. But in understanding the relationships, it gives us an ability to understand how we can adjust for that and maybe deal with some of those threats and opportunities that are out there. So very quickly, to give a summary, the first is being the threat of new entrants into the market, which is really about how easy is it for someone to set up shop in your particular field. How easy is it to start a new cab company, for instance? Also, how hard is it for someone to leave? Are some of the competitors around only because they can't really afford to quit? Maybe they're owners and they want to retire, but they have no one to buy the business from them, and they can't really afford to not do it unless they get somebody to buy from them. So that might be an area where you could see an opportunity for the company. There's also the bargaining power of buyers. How big of a role do your individual buyers play in your business? Do you have someone that controls 20 or 30% of your sales? If so, that person might have a lot of power in dictating terms to the cooperative, and that kind of rubs up against the idea of autonomy and independence. Likewise, the bargaining power of suppliers has a similar role. If there's only one person providing, or one company providing liability insurance, for instance, cab companies kind of forced to pay whatever that insurer wants to get for their demand. So again, putting it into your own industries, what are these different dynamics in playing, and what can the cooperative do? For instance, again, these arrows really go both ways. If there's only one person in a particular market, maybe, and it's something that is vital to the co-op's existence, maybe that's something that the co-op itself could start supplying. Likewise, there's other vertical integration that could happen on the producer, on the consumer end. The last one is, I think, probably the most exciting to me, and that's the threat of substitutes, because it allows us to, by engaging in this thought practice, this exercise, we are able to think about our businesses in ways that we might not normally think. For instance, in 2008, at the height of the crash, the market crash, hotels in Madison were having a really hard time filling their rooms, and so they were dropping their rates to just get people in the door. And what this created was a situation where it was really cheaper for, say, a couple to drive their car across town and to go out to a nightclub for the night, and instead of taking a cab home, they could get a hotel room for about the same price or less. That's really created the substitute where hotel rooms were basically a substitute for cab fare. Likewise, one of the more traditional substitutes that gets mentioned is dollar menus on fast food chains in inner city areas have created food deserts because they've effectively substituted out and driven out grocery stores. And so some areas like, as I understand, Detroit at the height of the Great Recession had no grocery stores within the city limits, and part of this was because of the substitute of fast food chains that's since been able to rebound. But again, this is understanding how some of these forces and substitutes can work to undermine the stability of your organization if you aren't paying attention to it. And so these kind of two tools, along with a more traditional SWOT analysis, can help you really place and understand how the growth of your community is affecting the growth of your cooperative. So considering the mission and considering a more business analysis, we want to turn now to thinking about how this all plays out within the cooperative framework. And to do this, we're talking about maintaining social cohesion, and this means really talking about cooperative values and principles, but also something called the new cooperative paradigm. So first up, the cooperative identity is the statement on the cooperative identity was drafted in 1995, so almost it's coming up on its 20th anniversary. This was a major overhaul of what's known as the Cooperative Principles to add a set of values of mutual self-help, self-responsibility, equality, equity, solidarity, and democracy as key values to cooperatives, as well as ethics of openness and honesty, social responsibility, and caring for others. These values and ethics are lodestones as cooperatives. These are the things we should be striving for as we build new models of growth and as we scale up the worker co-op movement. This goes along with the standard principles of open and voluntary membership, member economic participation, democratic member control, autonomy and independence, education, information, training, cooperation on cooperatives, and of course last, concern for community. There's actually discussion right now about adding a new principle specifically around environmental resiliency and being good stewards of the planet. But that's still in a kind of a debate mode. So these principles and co-ops and values provide sort of the overall framework for how we should be thinking about our growth and engaging our membership and working together. And they tie into something called the new cooperative paradigm. This is an idea researched and pushed forward by Daniel Cote, who teaches in Quebec and is part of the St. Mary's Master's Program. And in it, there are 4 key points, is that cooperatives need to build loyalty across stakeholder groups. So worker cooperatives, the members are also workers. They maintain 2 of the key central stakeholder groups, but they also have consumers and buyers and the general public and the community. And part of as cooperatives, we need to engage loyalty throughout those both ways in all of the stakeholder groups. We need to have a commitment to our communities, to our consumers, likewise build their commitment to our organizations. Part of this is also engaging as a learning organization and embracing the 5th principle, and that means helping our members become more educated, not just about their own business, but also how to be stronger citizens and more engaged in their own communities. And this is where part of using some of those tools like pestle analysis and 5 forces can be very useful in helping members become engaged and learn about their community. Also, we need to focus on creating meaningful work and the legitimacy of our organizations as social organizations, as well as traditional economic organizations. And finally, mobilizing our values. The values look great when they hang on the wall, but they need to do more than that. They need to be incorporated into our policies and our everyday operations. So putting this all together is taking the more traditional business models of analysis and taking the cooperative values and principles and pulling them together and creating membership involvement, and this will lead to some traditional methods of developing a growth plan. And I want to stress that there's no one right way to do any of this. This is again something that I've come to learn to do and that I found very valuable. And one of the values of keeping your membership involved is that the end product is something that there's a strong amount of support for, that people feel engaged throughout the process, and they'll support it through thick and thin. So some of the methods of engagement go beyond simply putting newsletters out, but really creating meetings and forums, engaging in dynamic governance or appreciative inquiry, but mostly it's about active participation. For instance, perhaps after holding a couple of forums to go through the PESTEL analysis or some of the other SWOT analysis and helping to educate and provide information to the membership is then able to put forward its ideas for growth or its ideas on how to manage growth using some of the concepts under dynamic governance. This would be done in a non-critical format where ideas are simply given equal value and equal weight. And then through this participation, members have the ability to get their ideas out and be part of the process. The next step would be going through kind of a scoring process, and this would be something that you would create questions. These are some sample questions that I created that might serve more generally or specifically. So for instance, does the proposal serve the co-op's mission statement? Does it build stakeholder loyalty? Will it improve the co-op standing in the community? Does it further the co-op strategic plan? Does it contribute to the co-op's role as a learning organization? Can this promote the cooperative model? Does it express the principles? Is there identified need in the marketplace or the community for this area of growth? And will it be financially sustainable? And is there a potential to create for co-op creation? These are just some questions. I think anyone you would kind of create your own that are native to your own co-op and to your own way that you want to structure around the mission statement and perhaps what it is you're trying to attain and of course the co-op principles. So once the questions are set up, you can list out each project that was developed through the membership forums. Again, accept all ideas as equal at this point. And then either the entire membership or if it's a development team can score each of the proposed projects along these questions. Perhaps one, maybe I have here a 0 to 2 scale, where 0 meaning it doesn't meet the criteria of the question, to 2 that is very favorable to it. You can put whatever sort of scale you want. The object is more to create a score as opposed to what the actual scale is. And then after each person who's participating in the scoring finishes, you can average the totals for each project and then rank them by average score. So here's an example, for instance, again from the cab company. So for instance, here are five questions, and you might have 25 or you might even have 30. And then as people scored them, this is how it ordered out. But just because an idea has a top ranking doesn't mean that that's what the co-op does. The co-op may decide, in fact, that even though the rankings came back very positively towards certain aspects, it's still not right for whatever reason. Maybe the numbers don't work out. Maybe there's something else happening in the marketplace that it causes that to change. During this process, things may have even changed to make the different projects not as viable as they once were. The key thing, though, is that it scores out the projects, and that the lower the score is, the higher the social risk, and perhaps the higher the financial risk for going forward with it. So the lower the score means that it needs more people to champion it, and more people to and more buy-in to get more of a commitment to its success. Again, though, even the scores at the top end, like in this case, airport shuttle or buying a rival, would still need a significant amount of championship within the organization. So some final thoughts. Again, this has been a very quick overview of ideas about how to manage growth in a worker cooperative. Hopefully there's some practical things people can take away, but more importantly, I think it's about the idea of embracing our economic organizations as also social organizations. They don't have to be either or. In fact, the new cooperative paradigm kind of says they're both at the same time. We can embrace the cooperative identity and have financially sustainable businesses. The corporate identity and the new cooperative paradigm hold the keys to managing our growth in a way that keeps our principles and values intact. And this requires us, though, to really make the effort to plan growth collectively and really to take cooperation, working together, to its real concept where people are engaged in the process from the beginning to the end, that at the end the final product has doesn't necessarily have to have consensus depending on what your organization wants, but it does have support of the membership. And finally, keep in mind that you're going through a process like this. The process itself can be its own reward because it can build social cohesion and therefore create a stronger organization. So even if at the end the co-op decides simply to maintain where it's at, it doesn't need to diversify out, it doesn't need to necessarily do any sort of hardcore growth, but it can still just kind of manage to meet demand. It's left with a membership that is more aware of where it sits in its environment and a process there where people feel have their voices heard and engaged as owners. And so that alone creates its own positive reward. So I hope this gave you some things to think about and think about managing growth. And I thank you for your time. And of course, if anyone has any questions, I'm always available at the email address on your screen. Thank you.